I had my rifle slung over my shoulder and a pack full of supplies, just in case. The plan was simple: track a deer, set up camp, and head back the next morning. Easy. I'd done it 100 times before. An hour into my hike, I found tracks, large, fresh ones leading deeper into the trees. My excitement stirred. The thrill of the hunt kicked in, and I followed them, moving carefully, ensuring each step was measured and silent. The track seemed to go on forever, leading me far beyond my usual hunting grounds. Then, something strange happened. The tracks changed. At first, they were the clear imprints of a deer, but as I went further, they morphed, growing broader, deeper, more human-like. But they weren't human. The shape was wrong. The proportions were unnatural. I crouched down, running my fingers along the edges of one print, feeling the soft dirt shift beneath my touch. My gut twisted. I'd never seen anything like it. The sun was slipping behind the hills, shadows stretching long and thin between the trees. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, that I was tired and reading too much into things. So, I pressed on. Then, the forest came alive. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The trees stood still. Nothing moved. I scanned the woods, rifle ready, but there was nothing. Just the silence pressing in from all sides. I shook it off and kept walking. Another snap. Closer this time. I turned faster, my breath catching in my throat. Again, nothing. But now, the air felt heavier, like something unseen was watching me. The tracks ahead twisted sharply, veering off the path I'd been following. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but my pride wouldn't let me. I needed to see what was at the end of those prints. The further I went, the worse it got. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground, once firm, grew soft, like something was shifting beneath the surface. The air smelled different, musty, like rotting leaves mixed with something metallic. Then, I heard it. A low, guttural growl. Not from a wolf. Not from any animal I'd ever encountered. It was deep, unnatural, vibrating through the trees like a sound that didn't belong in this world. My blood ran cold. I swung my rifle up, scanning the trees, but there was nothing, just darkness thickening between the trunks. I wanted to run, but my legs locked up. The instinct that had guided me my whole life was screaming now, leave. Something moved in the distance. A shadow detached from the trees, shifting, unnatural. It was tall, too tall, and its limbs seemed wrong, bending in ways that sent a sick feeling crawling up my spine. Its eyes, if that's what they were, gleamed faintly, reflecting the last traces of daylight. Then, it stepped toward me. I didn't think. I fired. The crack of my rifle shattered the silence, echoing through the forest. The shadow barely flinched. I ran. I don't remember how far I went, only that my lungs burned, my legs ached, and the feeling of being hunted refused to leave. The trees blurred past me as I tore through the woods, branches scraping at my arms and face. I didn't stop until I saw my truck's headlights flickering through the trees. I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out of there, not daring to look back. I haven't gone hunting alone since. Something's out there. Something that doesn't belong. And I know, deep in my bones, that it was hunting me. Weeks later, I told my friend Mark about my experience. He laughed it off, called me paranoid, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. So, we planned another trip, this time with him and 2 others, Dave and Kyle. Strength in numbers, we thought. The 4 of us set out before dawn, trekking deep into the woods, following the same path I had taken before. The atmosphere felt different with them there, but I couldn't shake the unease gripping my stomach. Dave joked about Bigfoot, but no one laughed. Then, we found the tracks again. Just like before, they started as deer prints and morphed into something else. Kyle bent down to examine them, his face losing all color. "These ain't normal," he murmured. As we pressed on, the forest grew unnaturally silent. The air thickened. Then, the growl came again, low, reverberating. This time, it was closer. Too close. Then, chaos erupted. Something burst from the trees, a blur of movement and shadow. Mark screamed. I barely saw it, only the flash of elongated limbs and eyes like molten metal. Dave raised his rifle, but it was too fast. Before I could react, Kyle was on the ground, screaming, his leg caught in its jaws. Blood pooled beneath him, dark in the fading light. I fired. Mark fired. The thing let out a shriek, something between a howl and a scream, before vanishing into the trees. Kyle was gasping, clutching his torn leg. "We have to go," Dave shouted, hauling him up. We ran, half dragging Kyle, our adrenaline pushing us forward. The feeling of being hunted was worse than before, something intelligent was out there, playing with us. The truck never felt farther away. When we finally reached it, we threw Kyle in the back and sped off. None of us spoke until we hit the highway. Kyle survived, but he won't talk about what happened. He claims he doesn't remember, but I see it in his eyes. He knows. We all do. Something lives in those woods. Something that doesn't belong. And now, it has our scent. The next day, Kyle was admitted to the hospital. His wounds were deep, his fever rising rapidly. The doctors were baffled, his blood work was all wrong, his vitals unstable. That's when the police got involved. They wanted answers. They wanted to know what could have done this. We told them everything, and I could see the disbelief in their faces. But then, reports started coming in. Other hunters. Hikers. People disappearing. Something was out there, and it was getting bolder. A search party was formed, armed officers, local rangers, even some military personnel. They went into the woods. Not all of them came back. What returned from those trees was bloodied, shaken, and silent. Whatever they saw, whatever they fought, it wasn't something they could explain. And it wasn't gone. The attacks didn't stop. Now, the town is on edge. People are leaving. Curfews are in place. The police patrol the outskirts, rifles at the ready. But deep down, we all know the truth. It's still hunting. And we are its prey. The town is different now. It used to be the kind of place where doors stayed unlocked, where kids played in the streets until the sun dipped below the trees. Not anymore. Now, when the sun sets, the street's empty. Windows shut. Rifles rest by bedsides. And yet, people are still disappearing. A month after our encounter, Mark's cousin, Daniel, went missing. He had gone out to check his traps near the ridge, just a quick trip before dark. He never came back. They found his ATV overturned in the brush, one wheel still spinning when they arrived. No blood. No struggle. Just the machine lying there, its engine humming like it had been abandoned in an instant. But the worst part? The tracks. They started as Daniel's boot prints. Then, just like before, they changed. I saw them myself. Dave and I joined the search party, our rifles ready, the weight of our past encounter pressing heavy on our backs. The tracks led us deeper than we'd ever gone before. The forest had always been a second home to us, but standing there, staring into the endless tangle of blackened trees, I felt like an intruder. The deeper we went, the worse it got. A stink clung to the air, rotting meat and something worse. The trees, ancient and gnarled, looked wrong, their bark split like old scars. Shadows seemed thicker here, stretching in ways that didn't make sense. Then, we found the first sign of Daniel. His hat. It lay at the base of a tree, soaked through with sweat. The ground around it was disturbed, like something heavy had dragged itself through the dirt. Then, Dave froze. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. Something was hanging from the branches above us. A mess of tangled flesh and shredded fabric, swaying slightly in the still air. Not Daniel. A deer. Or at least, what was left of one. Its ribcage was split open, its insides hollowed out like something had scooped them clean. Its head was missing. Not torn off, not bitten, just gone. The edges where the neck should have been were smooth, as if something had removed it with unnatural precision. No animal does that. We didn't say a word. We just turned and left, moving fast but careful, listening for anything following us. That night, I lay awake, staring at my ceiling. Daniel's face burned into my mind. We never found him. After Daniel, the town changed even more. The mayor called in state authorities, but they treated it like any other missing person case. No curfews. No warnings. Just the usual, stay in groups, don't wander off alone, and we're doing everything we can. But we knew better. People were leaving. The ones who stayed barricaded their homes at night. A few of us, Mark, Dave, and myself, knew that staying inside wouldn't be enough. So, we prepared. We weren't trained soldiers, but we knew these woods better than anyone. We set up trail cams, motion sensors, anything that could give us an edge. One night, the cameras caught something. At first, it was just a blur. A distortion in the air, moving between the trees like a shadow with too many limbs. Then, for the briefest second, it stopped. And turned toward the camera. The footage cut out right after. But in that final frame, we saw them. The eyes. Not glowing. Not reflecting light. Just black voids, too large, too deep, staring straight at us through the screen. Like it knew. Like it had been watching us all along. And now, it wanted us to know it was watching. We had a choice. Run, like the others. Or hunt it before it hunted us. We chose the latter. The four of us, Mark, Dave, myself, and an ex-Marine named Carter who had been keeping an eye on the situation, gathered our gear and set out before sunset. We were armed with rifles, knives, and enough ammunition to take down a bear. But we weren't hunting a bear. We were hunting something else. Something that had been waiting. And this time, it wouldn't let us leave so easily. The four of us moved through the trees like ghosts, rifles raised, senses sharp. The night swallowed the last traces of daylight, and an unnatural stillness settled over the woods. Not a single insect chirped. No wind rustled the leaves. It was like the world had stopped breathing. Carter took point, his movement steady, controlled. Mark was behind him, scanning the trees, while Dave covered our backs. I gripped my rifle tight, the metal cold against my palms. Every step forward felt like stepping into a grave. We followed the tracks, those same twisted prints that had haunted my nightmares. At first, they looked human, but then they grew wrong. The toes were elongated, too sharp, and the depth of the impression suggested something heavy. Something massive. Then, the smell hit us. Rotting meat. Coppery, thick, like a slaughterhouse left to bake in the sun. It burned the back of my throat. Mark gagged, pulling his scarf over his nose. Up ahead, Carter held up a fist. We stopped. Something was moving in the darkness. A shape, tall, hunched, shifted between the trees, its movements unnatural, jerky, like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. Its limbs bent at odd angles, its fingers too long, clawed. And the eyes, those hollow, endless pits locked onto us. It had been waiting. Then, it moved. Faster than anything that size should. Carter barely had time to yell before it was on him. A blur of black limbs and gnashing teeth. He fired point blank, 3-4 rounds into its chest. The thing staggered, but it didn't fall. It let out a sound. Not a scream. Not a growl. A laugh. Low, guttural, and wrong. Dave panicked and fired. The shots lit up the trees in flashes, and I saw it clearly for the first time. Its skin wasn't flesh. It was something else. Like stretched bark, like old leather, riddled with deep, pulsating cracks. Its mouth was too wide, filled with needle-like teeth that clicked together in anticipation. And then, it disappeared. Not into the trees. Not behind the brush. It melted into the darkness. Like the shadows had swallowed it whole. Where the fuck did it go? Mark's voice was raw with terror. We spun in circles, guns raised, breath coming in short gasps. The woods pressed in, the darkness growing thicker. Then, the whispering started. Not in front of us. Not behind us. All around us. Words we didn't understand. Words that scraped against our skulls like nails on bone. Carter grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. We need to move. Now. Then, the screaming began. Dave. I turned just in time to see him being dragged into the trees, his fingers clawing at the dirt, his mouth open in a soundless shriek. His rifle fired once, wildly, before the darkness took him. And then, silence. Dave! Mark shouted. He ran toward where Dave had been, where only moments ago, he had stood with us. But there was nothing there. Just the trees. Just the dark. Then, the whispering turned into laughter. Mocking. Hungry. Something was playing with us. Carter grabbed Mark and yanked him back. Run. We didn't argue. We ran. Branches whipped against my face. Please subscribe to the channel. Your support is incredible for us. The ground uneven beneath my boots. The truck was miles away, but I didn't care. We just needed distance. We just needed to get out. Then, the trees changed. They stretched taller, their bark peeling in long, fleshy strips. The ground grew soft, like something was shifting beneath it. Roots jutted up like grasping hands, moving when we weren't looking. We weren't in our woods anymore. We were somewhere else. Somewhere it controlled. Carter fired behind us, but there was nothing there. Just laughter. Just whispers. Then, I saw something ahead. A light. Flickering. Pale. Like a lantern swaying in the wind. It wasn't from a house. It wasn't from a person. But it was leading us. I didn't question it. I ran toward it, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for relief. Mark and Carter followed, and for the first time, the whispers hesitated. We broke through the trees and stumbled into a clearing. The light vanished. But we weren't alone. Dave was there. Or what was left of him. He was standing, but his head was tilted at an unnatural angle, his arms hanging limply at his sides. His chest rose and fell in shallow, jerky breaths. His skin was wrong, stretched too tight, his veins blackened. His eyes. His eyes were gone. Hollow pits, just like the thing in the woods. Mark choked on a sob. Dave. Dave's mouth opened. And the whispering poured out. A chorus of voices, layered over one another. Men. Women. Children. All speaking at once. Carter raised his rifle. But Dave. Dave moved too fast. He was on Carter in a blink, his hands clawing at Carter's throat, his mouth stretching wider, wider, too wide. Mark screamed and fired. The shot echoed through the clearing. Dave, or whatever was wearing his skin, collapsed. The whispering stopped. And then, the forest screamed. A sound so inhuman, so vast, that it ripped through my skull like shattered glass. The trees shook. The ground shuddered. And something massive moved in the darkness beyond the clearing. It had been toying with us. And now, it was done playing. We ran. I don't remember how we made it back to the truck. The next thing I knew, Carter was gunning it down the dirt road, Mark sobbing in the seat next to me. None of us spoke. We just listened. Because in the distance, far behind us, but not far enough. The laughter followed. We don't talk about that night. Dave's body was never found. The authorities ruled it a disappearance, but we knew better. We tried to warn the town. Told them to leave. Some listened. Most didn't. Now, people are vanishing every week. The woods are changing. And every night, when I close my eyes, I hear it whispering to me. Laughing. Waiting. It's still hunting. And it's getting closer. The town is dying. At first, it was just whispers. People spoke in hushed voices about the disappearances, hunters, hikers, even an entire family that lived near the woods. Then came the visions, shadows shifting in bedroom corners, voices whispering from vents, nightmares so real that people woke up screaming. Now, the streets are empty. People left in the dead of night, cars packed hastily, tires screeching against pavement. Those who stayed have either vanished or changed. Like Kyle. Like Dave. They don't die. They become something else. Mark, Carter, and I knew we had one chance. We couldn't run. Not anymore. The thing in the woods, whatever it was, had claimed this town. It was spreading. We had to end it. Or die trying. The plan was simple, fire and lead. We'd head back into the woods, find its nest, if it had one, and burn it to hell. We loaded up our rifles, packed every round of ammunition we could carry, and siphoned gas from abandoned cars. Carter grabbed road flares, stuffing them into his jacket. If this doesn't work, Mark muttered, we're all dead. I looked out at the darkened town. We're dead either way. The woods felt alive. The trees breathed. Their bark pulsed, veins bulging beneath the surface. The ground was softer now, like stepping across old flesh. Mark clutched his rifle, his eyes darting between the trees. I don't like this. None of us do, Carter muttered. Then, the whispers started. Not from the trees. From behind us. From within us. They spoke in voices we knew. Dave's voice. Kyle's voice. My father's voice. They called our names, sweet and slow, like a mother lulling her child to sleep. Like they wanted us to turn around. Mark faltered. His breath hitched. Jesus Christ. Don't listen. I grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. The forest wanted us to stop. But we pressed on. Then, ahead, a clearing. And in the center, a hole. Not a cave. Not a pit. A gaping wound in the earth. Black, endless. Pulsating like a heartbeat. The smell of rotting flesh and burning hair rolled over us. I gagged, covering my mouth, but the stench crept in anyway, thick and wet. Something moved in the dark. Not one thing. Many. Shapes, twisting and writhing, crawling over each other. Mark fumbled with his rifle. What the fuck is this? Carter grabbed a road flare, striking it against his thigh. The red glow flickered to life, casting deep shadows across the clearing. And that's when we saw it. A figure rose from the hole. It wasn't a man. It wasn't an animal. It was everything. Its form shifted, pulsing with the faces of the lost. Dave's mouth stretched across its chest, whispering our names. Kyle's hollow eyes blinked from its arms. And it was smiling. It laughed. The sound split the air, rattling my teeth, shaking the trees. Mark screamed and fired. The bullets ripped through it. Holes tore open in its flesh, but there was no blood. No wounds. Just more faces. It wasn't a creature. It was a god. Carter roared, hurling the flare. It landed at the creature's feet. The light made it shrink back. It hated the fire. I grabbed a Molotov, my hands shaking as I struck the lighter. Burn, you son of a bitch. The bottle shattered. Flames erupted. The creature screamed. Not in pain. In rage. The ground lurched. The trees bent toward us, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. The hole widened. Something was coming. Something bigger. I grabbed Mark. We have to go. Carter threw the last of the flares. The flames licked at the trees, catching on the dry branches. The forest was burning. We ran. The truck was in sight. But so was it. The thing wasn't gone. It was everywhere. The shadows stretched toward us, twisting into fingers, into teeth. The road cracked beneath us, revealing more darkness. I jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. Mark barely made it into the passenger side before the window exploded. Carter. Carter never made it. 1 second, he was behind us. The next, he was gone. The last thing I heard was his scream. Then. Silence. I floored the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires skidding over dirt, the fire behind us consuming the trees. Mark was shaking, his skin pale, his breath ragged. It's not dead. It's not dead. It's not dead. I didn't answer. Because I knew. We all knew. We never spoke about what happened. Not to the police. Not to the reporters. Because there was nothing left to find. By the time the authorities arrived, the town was empty. Every house abandoned. Every road cracked. The forest, gone. Nothing but blackened earth. No bodies. No bones. No signs that anyone had ever lived there. Like the town had never existed. Like it had been erased. Mark and I went our separate ways. We don't call. We don't visit. Because we both know the truth. We didn't kill it. We didn't stop it. We only delayed it. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still and the air is heavy, I hear it. Laughing. Whispering. Calling my name. Waiting. Because one day, it will come back. And next time, there will be nowhere left to run.